For more than 7 decades, Indian PSUs have played an important role in the overall socio-economic development of the nation. They have been the engines of the Indian government's mission to achieve social upliftment, inclusive growth, and self-sufficiency in terms of key inputs and resources. The COVID-19 pandemic has severely dented India's growth story. While the government has already introduced several reforms aimed at spurring a revival, Indian PSUs can help boost investment, provide employment, contribute to the exchequer through taxes and dividend, support MSMEs, contribute to exports, and become ambassadors of corporate governance. As India completes a milestone of 75 years of independence, Indian PSUs can play a critical role in reinforcing the economy by focusing on building resilience and on modernizing their systems, processes, and approaches. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm sure you are eagerly looking forward to listening to the views of our power-packed panel today. But before we begin, I request everyone to please take a moment and go through the guidelines that have been displayed on your screen. We certainly welcome questions for the panel. Please type your queries in the Ask Questions section. These will be taken up during the Q&A session after the completion of the panel discussion. A couple of tips though. We want to know you more, hence please mention your name and the name of your organization while posting your questions. You could also mention the name of the speaker you are directing your question to. As you can see at the bottom of your screens, there is an Ask Question button. This will help you direct your questions to our distinguished speakers. Now, let's take a look at the floor for today's session. And for that, please refer to the agenda displayed on your screen right now. Clearly a promising agenda with an eminent lineup of speakers. I would like to take this opportunity to thank everyone for being part of this grand virtual event this afternoon. Let's kickstart then with the opening keynote by Shri Alok Ratan Sharma, Senior Solutions Specialist Business Applications at Microsoft India. Shri Sharma has more than 20 years of progressive experience in strategically managing revenue, generating sales management roles across major global software and technology companies like Microsoft, SAP, Oracle, IFS, and Kronos. He's currently involved in conceptualizing Dynamics 365 solution for public sector and specializes in ICT systems in engineering and infrastructure industry, process consulting and process improvement, and enterprise project portfolio management. Welcome, Shri Sharma. Over to you.
Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you, Frazier, for this nice introduction. I'm sure this session is going to be a very brainstorming session. We all understand with the COVID kind of scenario, we all are facing challenges and we are working in a virtual world. When we talk about digitization is now happening everywhere, and governments are under pressure to keep up with things like digitally engaging citizens, collaborating across organizations, building a millennium workforce, and controlling cost. Let's start with digitally engaging citizens. All over the world, people have now access to technology that only a few years ago seemed impossible. There are now more mobile devices than there are people on this planet. Virtually everyone, everywhere has mobile access to the internet, social media, and the masses of data behind them. Let's talk about collaboration across organizations. Currently, most of these government agencies have been trying to break down silos and boost collaboration. 75% of cross-functional teams face challenges such as meeting a planned budget, staying on schedule, meeting expectations, and completing projects on time. When we talk about employee collaboration and an integration and collaboration between departments, for years, state governments, local governments, and federal agencies have had difficulties attracting and retaining the millennium workforce. It is true that government workforce is graying. Another big issue, whatever different public sector organization and government agencies are facing is in terms of controlling costs. Costs are being pushed up because there is a higher standard and wider variety of public services, further driven by increased consumer experience expectation. At the same time, government balance sheets are under pressure to stay flat or decline, controlling the total cost of government, reducing borrowing deficits and avoiding highly unpopular tax raises. And over and above this, the biggest challenge what government organizations are facing around secure data. Government have always worried about security and privacy, but in an online world and given recent data losses, government insider revelations and both private and state-sponsored hacking scandals, security have moved front and center as top concern of government departments. With all these challenges, how different kind of IT systems and softwares can help us in doing the complete digitization of these organizations. If we do some more deep dive, there are other challenges around this. Strict regulation and legacy systems make it really difficult to collaborate across organizations. Our young generation are interested in government jobs, but they expect a modern workplace. Budget hasn't increased with the increasing demands of government services. You can't keep up with increasing security risk and compliance requirements. So with all these challenges, as we all are celebrating 75 years of our independence, we have seen our public sector organizations are working extensively and helping all the citizens. And with these challenges, what all are the things citizens are expecting? Let's have a look at that as well. Citizens are looking forward to have a single window solution available for different kind of services. They are expecting a self-service option with 24/7 help portals. Government can save more time and can better manage resources by enabling multiple touch points for citizens. So that has also become one of the biggest expectations from these citizens. Government organizations are looking forward to have an integrated interdepartmental solutions available so that the service time gets low and governments act or the different organizations act as a services organizations to our citizens. With this, I just want to take a pause here and want to give you a brief understanding in terms of how we are going to get different kind of answers from our panelists in terms of how different public sector organizations are coping with these challenges and what is that is going to be the next future for next 10 years time for us. With this, I would like to pass on the baton to Faisal again and start the discussion.
Thank you very much, Sri Sharma. It was indeed quite an insightful keynote address. The stage is set, ladies and gentlemen, so without further ado, let's get this most awaited and power-packed panel discussion rolling. The discussion, as I said earlier, is around the topic Building Resilience and Modernizing India at 75 and Beyond. We have a great lineup of speakers featuring in this panel discussion. Our panel includes a great mix of thought leaders and head honchos. Our viewers can certainly look forward to some great takeaways from today's proceedings. Let me begin by introducing the person who will help steer the conversation and help bring today's panel discussion to life. Ladies and gentlemen, today's session will be moderated by Dr. Arun Singh, Global Chief Economist and Senior Director with Dun & Bradstreet. Dr. Arun Singh has worked across global quantitative and qualitative economic research, econometric modeling, and commodity and industry research for the past 2 decades. He has provided strategic advice and expertise to aid decision-making within various government and private organizations. Dr. Singh's ability to connect economic insight and data and explain business implications has led to him becoming a trusted advisor and expert for media, government, and clients alike. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Dr. Arun Singh. Let me now introduce the eminent lineup of speakers joining us on the panel today. In no particular order then, let us begin by welcoming a practitioner development economist and ex-Secretary Steel and IT in the Government of India, She developed concepts of resource convergence and common household database Samagra, now part of policy making in India and across the globe. We welcome Dr. Aruna Sharma, Member, Digitization Committee, Reserve Bank of India. Welcome and thank you for joining us, Dr. Sharma. Ladies and gentlemen, a round of applause for her, please. Our next panelist is currently serving as Additional Secretary and Financial Advisor, Ministry of Power, Government of India, and has been collector for more than 5 years in 3 districts of Madhya Pradesh and Chhattisgarh. He has also served at the state level as Secretary and Principal Secretary of various departments, including Home, Higher Education, and Finance for many years. Ladies and gentlemen, please put your hands together for Shri Ashish Upadhyay, IAS, Additional Secretary and Financial Advisor, Ministry of Power, Government of India. Welcome and thank you, Shri Upadhyay, for joining us. Our third panelist handles ICT support to all departments of Ministry of Finance, including PFMS, e-procurement, and artificial intelligence divisions in NIC. He is also the group head of the personnel division in NIC and has been involved in large e-governance applications such as eWaybill, e-invoice, PFMS, and Central Public Procurement Portal. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Shri Nagesh Shastri, Deputy Director General, National Informatics Center, with a big round of applause. Welcome, Shri Shastri. Our next panelist is the Director of Finance at KIOCL Limited, a leading pellet maker EOU, and the Government of India enterprise under the Ministry of Steel. He was also entrusted with the additional charge of Chairman and Managing Director between July and September 2021. He has 33 years of diversified multicultural, multi-country, and multi-industry professional experience in a number of entities in CPSE, MNC corporate sectors in areas of finance and accounts, corporate affairs, information technology, and human resource. Ladies and gentlemen, please put your hands together for Shri Swapan Kumar Gorai, Director Finance, KIOCL Limited. Thank you for joining us today, Shri Gorai. Our fifth panelist has been working in the field of product development and solution engineering in the strategic electronics domain for the past 30 years. He's a professional with several years of extensive experience in project management, strategy development and implementation, and strategic planning, and is also a subject matter expert in homeland security. Please welcome Shri Anurag Kumar, Executive Director, Security Systems, Electronics Corporation of India Limited. Friends, a round of applause to welcome Shri Kumar. Our next guest is Global Microsoft Business Applications Sales Leader with sales leadership experience across private and public sector engagements. He has led multiple full lifecycle end-to-end Microsoft Dynamics 365 engagements for global organizations across diverse industry verticals, including telecom, communications, financial services, health insurance, integrated services, retail, consumer goods, logistics, resources, high-tech, heavy engineering, and the public sector. Dear friends, join me in welcoming with a round of applause Shri Amit Shyamal, Senior Director, Microsoft Practice, APAC and India, Infosys Limited. And last but not the least, our final guest has over 3 decades of experience spanning various domains of the power sector, including planning and setup of power plants, financing of generation, transmission and distribution segments, and implementing reform schemes in the sector, and was also in charge of implementing sectoral reform schemes of the Government of India in the power sector, including restructured accelerated power development and reforms programs and integrated power development scheme. Ladies and gentlemen, please put your hands together for Shri Subir Saha, Executive Director, Power Finance Corporation Limited. I welcome you all once again, and if you haven't yet, I request you all to please come now on video. Without further ado, let's begin this eagerly awaited panel discussion. I invite Dr. Arun Singh to please take over.
Thank you, Fraser, for such a wonderful introduction of all the panelists. It was really great to know that I'm sitting within the such a great, eminent speakers and such a knowledge base, and I'm looking forward for really a wonderful conversation and coming out with really key takeaways for our audience, and then going forward what we can do. In fact, good afternoon, and it's really my great pleasure and privilege to host you all on this panel discussion, which is basically India's top PSUs, building resilience and modernizing India at 75 and beyond. One thing we all are struggling, and we are in the middle of last 7 quarters, basically the COVID-19 pandemic. We're trying to understand. We took some time, and one word you might have heard first time or some of the time, let's say very second or third, but it's every day at least I hear 20 to 30 times. That's basically unprecedented. The impact of COVID-19 was unprecedented, but the good news and was one supporting news, I could say that was equally supported by government across world, and in India we have a example of this one. So that support was unprecedented. We have never seen such a support, and as a result, of course, there are some challenges in terms of the public debt for most of the countries, because advanced countries, if you see, we went to World War II level, but that was required. That was basically everyone out supporting everything. Who were the front running in this support scheme was, of course, the government led by the PSUs and then various public sector department, and they had in fact, and our Sri Upadhyayji will talk about more, and then all the government employees said they're basically within office, working from the office, and then taking on head on with the pandemic and trying to resolve those pandemic impact and ensure that economy revive quickly. So coming back to the PSU, the pain they have gone through in last 7 quarters, in fact 75, last 75 years, PSU has always been a core pillar of economic growth and development, not just in India, but across the world. If I have to basically compare just some of the countries, the economic success stories in China and Singapore are in fact testimonials to the capabilities and importance of the PSUs. Unlike most businesses, PSU had to walk a tightrope of balancing commercial and the non-commercial objectives. On top of that, in fact, in addition to staying relevant to the fast evolving business landscape, they also have to play a role of nudging the private sector in areas which is critical from the societal standpoint, but are not attractive from a short-term trade-off perspective. In this panel discussion, let's deliberate more on how the role of Indian PSUs have evolved over a time, last 75 years, their relevance today in the current age, especially in the pandemic and during the pandemic era, their importance in aiding economic revival and then future, and how they are adopting in the era of data-driven digital transformation. Because I think that's the subject everyone is talking about, and pandemic had just accelerated those development, and thus in fact this fast forwarded by something 7 to 10 years, various studies indicate. With that, I will basically stop my opening submission. I'll move to some of our panelists, and in fact I'll ask first question, which is very critical sector and which is critical, the government department and PSUs who basically taking care of all connected and the compliant. NRC, I'm coming to you, Sri Shastri ji. The post-independence era, the Indian PSUs were established to spearhead industrialization at a time when the private sector was very nascent and there was a social disparities. In fact, it was huge social disparities. Since then, we have come a long way. How would you describe the relevance and importance of Indian PSUs in today's age? Mr. Sastry.
Well, the PSUs, when they started off, their objective was not only monetary or financial gains, because they also focused on the societal development and job opportunities. Therefore, they provided an impetus to the growth of economy as well. Now, coming to the period over which they have grown, this is nearly 50 years. A lot of PSUs, which are whether at the state level or the central level, they have been contributing to the growth of the economy as well as providing the job opportunities. And the way they have stayed relevant in the time of competition with the private sector is by reinventing and by reorienting their people and processes. So that is how they have continued to stay relevant with the face of competition. And I feel, for example, we take NIC itself. NIC is a 4-decade-old organization, started off in '76. When it started off, NIC was the only solution provider to the government. However, over a period of time, many other organizations also started providing services to the central as well as state government departments. But NIC, its wide reach right up to the district level, it has played a very important role in implementation of state and central schemes, as our district centers have acted as the last mile service delivery points. So, and NIC also over a period of time has reinvented and come up with many applications which are based on the cutting edge technologies such as blockchain or artificial intelligence. So to my mind, that's the key: reinvent and reorient. That's how we have implemented.
Thank you, Mr. Sastry. In fact, of course I agree that PSU is not just for a commercial, basically for the non-commercial nature as well and society development. And in that context, their role is equally critical and very important. Now, coming to you, Sri Upadhyay, and from a government body, and you know that you're managing a core sector, and that's core sector. We all have seen in the last few years that how painful it could be because we are connecting to the masses. What role do the PSUs play in aiding economic recovery post the pandemic, if you have to basically analyze that, Mr. Upadhyay?
Thank you, Mr. Singh. I think in present scenario, when we saw economy suddenly tumbling down because of the effect of COVID, electricity was one sector which we had to keep running at any cost, but at the same time, the recovery was not forthcoming. So the first challenge was to keep the electricity flowing in hospitals, in houses, industry, whatever was open, and howsoever it was open. And there the government stepped in. And that's how the critical role of public sector in the government, I'll call government also a public sector, it started coming in. But frankly, if you ask me, public sector did a very great job in last 75 years, whether it is power or communication or any other sector. But the landmark change which occurred in history of India, economic history of India in 1991, that was the turning point where resilience started coming in. It is my opinion that while private sector had adopted to those changes from 91 onwards very agile, very swiftly, in a very agile manner, public sector was slow, and somehow they continued to work in the monopoly or in nomination route. It was only last year in 2020 that for the first time we started exposing the public sector to competition on a very large scale. Earlier also we had started exposing it to competition in civil aviation, in telecom, and results were very good for the country. But now in all sectors, they are competing, and it is not only going to help the public sector in strengthening itself, in inventing itself. NTPC has recently come in the form of a new player, a very powerful player in renewable energy, and have given the famous sub-rupee 2 rate per unit in solar energy sector. Similarly, Power Grid Corporation of India Limited has also won most of the bids which were offered in open competition for interstate transmission. It was not possible. This efficiency is the result of the competition. So I think more and more competition will have to be come in sector. And while making them competitive, all the public sector will have to keep in mind that ultimately, whether it's private sector or public sector, they both exist for the customer. So a customer-centric approach will have to be kept. On a lighter note, I would like to share my experience with you. There is a famous temple in Gwalior where Lord Krishna is very rich. He owns millions of worth jewelry. But because of the security reason, he is allowed to wear it only once on Janmashtami. So similarly, if we put too much security around customer and we don't give emphasis on ease of doing business, then somewhere we lose the track. So public sector has to keep in mind that does not exist for itself. And in the end, both are owned by public. Public sector through the elected representatives or through bureaucrats, private sector directly through shareholding. But both are owned by public, so they should serve the public. They should keep in mind they exist for the public. If they will like to exist only for themselves, I'm sorry, they will not be able to continue for long, as we are seeing some of the public sector going downhill.
Thank you, Mr. Upadhyay, for that wonderful insight. And in fact, I must agree to this one. I think we are moving towards the customer-centric approach. Customer service is a top priority, and I think that's driving the innovation. And that's driving the innovation in the planet. So now that same question, Mr. Saha, if I ask you, same question about what is your view that what PSU can play in terms of economic revival, because I think 7 quarters we are in trouble and everyone is looking at PSUs to lead provide the charge or the support. What do you think specific role PSU can play in this one? The same question asked to you, Mr. Shah. Sir, you are on mute if you are speaking.
Sorry. Very good afternoon. I think it's a very good question, and Sir has already dealt on this issue. I'll add only a few points on this. To survive or to do better, global competitiveness is important. And global competitiveness, as I look at it, it requires 4 major things: scale of operation, skilled manpower, technological adoption, and innovation, apart from few others as well. Scale of operation, which these public sector enterprises can really give, they are giants, no doubt about it. They have best of manpower, technology they are adopting, innovation, slowly it is coming in. So PSEs, they can do great. Economies of scale, actually, they play a very crucial role in rapidly expanding this industry sector. I'll sidestep a little bit. As you have earlier said about role of PSEs, I'll go a little bit behind. Public sectors, the concept that came from Industrial Policy Resolution 1956, After that, PSUs, public sector enterprises, they start setting in, and it is only in mid-80s public sectors they are asked to be or rather to work on commercial lines. Earlier, the major objective was for employment generation. So there's a change in 80s, and then of course, as I said already, in 1991 and 2002, they are the major changes we have seen. So I'll go back to the main subject again. These PSEs are large, they are well capitalized companies, and most of them, they are leaders in their respective fields as such. I would just refer that Public Enterprise Survey 2019-20, which indicated total capital employed by all our CPSEs is over 31 lakh crore, and they earned a net profit of 1 lakh crore. This only indicate a size. I thought I just mentioned two numbers. They actually indicate the size. They are great. They are giants in their own area. So far as PFC is concerned, PFC has made a cumulative disbursement of 8 lakh crore so far. When we take PFC and REC together, because PFC has already taken over major shares of REC, then the 16 lakh crore consolidated disbursement these two companies they have made in the power sector. As on date, PFC is outstanding, is large, is 3.7 lakh crore. That means this much of money is invested in the market. With REC together, it is actually double the amount. PFC has made a net profit of 8,400 crore last year. And many of the PSEs are doing good amount of profit. We are going through this COVID days. PFC has also contributed during this COVID. PFC has also been instrumental in ensuring liquidity in the power sector during this pandemic period. PFC and REC together, they have actually sanctioned 1.34 lakh crore, and out of which 79,000 crore has been disbursed to the various DISCOMs, which has brought in liquidity. This is under this government's Atmanirbhar Bharat Abhiyan package. Moreover, under this CSR plan, last year PFC has spent over 200 crore for COVID relief activities. Similarly, many or most of the PSEs they have done, they are contributing, they are giants, they are doing great job in their area. So PSEs are essential, they are evolving as well today. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Shah, for such a added insight into this one. That was really great. And now, I think when we talk about speed, so digitization is always considered as a one of a core element to this one. So, with that agenda, I'm coming to you, Dr. Sharma. In your opinion, what are the factors that could hinder the PSU's contribution in this regard if not addressed quickly? What is your view about that one? So that factor, of course, one can promote and that can go, but there are enough factors which, if you're not trying to address right now, will certainly ensure that the PSU is not growing. What is your opinion in that?
You are absolutely right, because whether it is technology operations, so that is also based on a lot of commands, so digitization is happening in the entire manufacturing itself, and then it is happening in the management of it, then it is happening in the operation part of it. So this kind of a shift is very, very important, whether we are talking of the public sector banks, whether we are talking of the public sector manufacturing units, or we are talking about the public sector governance models. And you will be surprised to know the level and quick adoption that many of them have done, on which many of the private sectors have got the base to operate and develop further. I'd like to give two examples of the social sector, and one of the fintech and one of the private sector. So if you look in the social sector, in 2012, it was decided that all payments should be done through direct benefit transfers, right? Now, if all payments to be done direct benefit transfer, before that it was individual banks with their own IT systems. And then there was government, and then there was post offices which were non-digitized. What you mentioned, a big public sector penetrated important financial institution for having a good financial inclusion. So they were also there, and we had a cooperative banks which were again not non-digitized or into the digitized sector. Now, for all this, the bridges were made by putting them together and linking with the PFMS, which was a real-time treasury management, so that the money is not parked elsewhere. And this entire connectivity of the digitization happening in every sector, in every MIS that was there with the departments. So initially it was done for a G2P, that is government to person. And this entire thing was linked together, and the financial inclusion model was developed, access was developed in 5-kilometer radius. But on this then graduated now G2B, G2C, B2B, rewards, everything has happened, and now you will find, whether it's a public sector or including government, there is no cash or check dealing literally anywhere. Everything is transferred into a digitized mode of MIS. From MIS, that is information system, you generate the payment systems. And that is how they have actually modeled themselves and moved ahead at a very, very breakneck speed and very quick transformation which has happened. Then there was a mention about the Samagra data. See, when we talk of social inclusion, the SDG goal said no one should be left behind. How are you going to know who is left behind? Which is a policy of the government that it has to be an inclusive growth. So this kind of a common household database, which is again developed by NIC, a public sector undertaking, now adopted in 8 states, being adopted in Europe. Now, this kind of a common household database linked to Aadhaar, which is for identifier, so that there is no double data of an individual, which is developed by a private sector, again a digitized data, has made the whole difference into the entire governance model and breaking the silos between the different departments. Another example, I would like to give you a small example where now you must have read so much about the aggregation, or you must have heard about the credit data. Now, credit data in the public sector banks, if you talk about, in the government banks, in the microfinance sector, in small finance banks, now everything is getting aggregated, which will decide your credit worthiness, which will decide your how much credit you have taken. So everything will be again in a one place. So data analytics will be reflected so well there, and it is emerging quite strongly. So these are a good example where the adaptation has taken place. There may be some slow examples because many a times the departments evolved at a different stage of digitization. But now time has come to break that silos and bring them together. So it is happening in the social sector, but not so much in the other databases, because data has to talk to each other. Otherwise, it doesn't make sense. And that graduation is happening in different public sectors, where now the technology is forcing them to adopt that means. And of course, like Ashish Upadhyay rightly said, after 91, coming of private banks, you must have seen the State Bank of India suddenly waking up with a jolt from a deep slumber, and they suddenly become customer friendly, right, or consumer friendly. And today, if you look at it in the government sector, all services are digitized. So whether you're paying your electricity bill or whether you're doing your other things, everything is digitized. And parallelly to that, with 100 million telephones, across the country, billion telephones, it is making such a huge difference to the population, to the way and mode we are making. So it is very, very clear that this digitization, anybody who wants to be in the race have to adopt it, whether it is their information system, whether it is their market analysis system, whether it is other systems. If they want to be competitive, they will have to sort of graduate it, work upon it. You have strong in-house building like NIC who develop these softwares. You have outhouses through big companies, private companies who are working together with the government to develop these kind of softwares. So in the sense, the digitization actually has taken place quite a lot, which we undermine in the government to a very, very considerable extent. And a lot of informed decision making is happening. But the hindrance, what is happening is the policy making is in silos. So if I give you two examples of policies, for e-commerce policy, I think there are too many fathers. So you have a Commerce Ministry coming with something, then IT Act coming with something, then Consumer Affairs coming with something, when the whole database is digitized. And when we talk of privacy of data, then you have RBI also stepping in, and our data privacy policy is still awaited. So it is very important that the hindrance will only come if we start making policies as knee-jerk or in silos. What is important is to understand what Mr. Upadhyay very rightly said of ensuring ease of business, yet providing an umbrella thing to regulate. So if we are talking of cryptocurrencies being regulated, it is only to protect the citizens, right? To that extent. So whether we should treat it as a commodity asset or we should allow it to be, and then a digital currency is an RBI backed currency, which is not the speculative mode in which the cryptocurrency works. So this is how the whole operations are taking place. So just in the end, I will say that it is not that PSU has been lacking behind. The PSU has been borrowing money from open market, which has ensured that they are not government dependent. They have to be equally efficient if they want to be in the market. Otherwise, they will perish. They have adopted digital means very, very efficiently for their survival initially, and now adopting a competition. And especially in the social sector, the governance model has come out very, very strongly thanks to digitalization, I must say.
Thank you, Dr. Sharma. I think that was quite elaborate insight. And just to add as an outcome, I would say that I'm traveling out of my own city for last few days. To be very honest, I'm just carrying this mobile phone, no cash in hand, nothing. And I did almost 20 payment in last 4 days, but absolutely no. That's basically service. That's the power of digitalization we're talking about. And I'm saying the government involved in this one, PSU is involved in this, was not just the private body. So that's really the great outcome. And in fact, that's a success story we have seen. And I think you have triggered the next wave of conversation, which basically talks about the digital transformation, e-governance, and then priorities for the future ready PSUs. And there could be in fact, there are a lot of scope, and we have grown good, but something something what needs to be done in order to ensure that we are capitalize on those development which we have achieved in last few years. And I mean, it's a quick success. I think we got it. And coming to Mr. Kumar, Mr. Anurag Kumar, and since you are in the system, and I just wanted to ask, post the outbreak of COVID-19, the pandemic, the most businesses have come to realize that digital transformation is very critical for the success now and in the future. I mean, what is your viewpoint, and can you provide some insight that how the PSUs are adopting to this situation? And Dr. Sharma spoke about in detail, but what is your view and what is your viewpoint around that? Mr. Kumar, you're on mute if you're speaking.
Good afternoon. Due to COVID as an industry, we also face a lot of challenges. It started from our not able to come to office, then our raw material getting stuck in out of country and even the place of manufacturing in India. And then how to manage the ecosystem when you are able to get only 1/3 or half of the people. So our system was further adopted to this requirement. It will not say come to up to digitization, but communication mode has changed. Now everybody is using VC. But in our perspective, we have some data security issue, so we cannot link up with any VC from anywhere. So our own app was developed. So within our organization, we use our own developed app at different location, and we started utilizing that facility for our day-to-day work. Similarly, the systems were also used to collate the supplies and get that in time. So with this way, we were able to get the material, cope up the situation and start working. In addition to that, in this COVID period, there was a guideline and requirement from the government that we do something which helps the current pandemic. So our R&D teams, from their working from home with whatever bandwidth available, they have developed a patient monitoring system, a wearable device from which the parameters can be monitored. So these were supplied to AIIMS and other hospital, and it served its purpose. So now it is being commercially offered also. As a digital initiative, ECIL has done capacity building long time back. So we have a development team who is CMM level 5 certified. We have initially worked with NIC for immigration portal long time back, at least 15 years back. Initially, we worked together and then NIC took it forward. Many of our projects like sales tax monitoring portal for Maharashtra government, land record management system for Kerala government, then for Delhi government, bus pass management system, many such solutions we have given to customer. Recently, we have provided one enterprise level platform to Bureau of Civil Aviation. So many people at different airports, the numbers are around 4 lakhs. They have to be issued the entry passes as per their requirement, zone wise, airport wise, all airport wise. So a platform was built which is web operated, hosted at NIC. So the users are logging in there, they're putting their credential, applying for the passes, and they get it printed and issued to the people as per the SOP. So as an organization, we have full capacity to provide e-governance solution, and we are working towards different projects. So we are offering that to government and other bodies. So this is adding to our already existing business. Like we are primarily dealing in nuclear power plants. So where there is technology denial, restriction on technology, so we have to develop and get the system qualified. It is a very long cycle. We are able to do that. So we have that resilience and bandwidth to manage the business in current pandemic time, all restrictions, trade restrictions, and we have our own products and solution in e-governance model also. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Kumar. So, in coming to you, Mr. Gorai,
yes.
You're talking about technology. What are some of the key technology that public sector undertaking need to deploy in order to make their digital transformation strategy more meaningful? Do you have any success story within the finance domain which you might have implemented or want to use this one?
Thank you, Mr. Singh, for giving me the opportunity. Before I come to that topic, I would like to, for the sake of enlightening my audience, to talk a little bit about the company, because our company is not that much well known. But many of us, already knows that this company came into being about in 1976 as part of the collaboration with Government of Iran and Government of India to establish a mining in the Sahyadri region of Western Ghats, a beautiful place there. So we are operating about 7 million ton of iron ore mines, which were essentially intended to beneficiate the low-grade iron ore into a usable high-grade through beneficiation. That concept was new at that time. So next 25 years, we had a very successful operation. However, in 2006, in view of the Forest Act, this area was declared as the National Forest. And thereafter, from 1st January 2006, this mine operation was completely closed. After that, next 10 years was a period of struggling and survival. So sometime we were commercially successful, sometime we are not. We had 5,000 employees to be fed, but being a public sector, as you know, public sector was created for the purpose of generating employment, not for the purpose of destroying employment. Somehow we could manage, sail through. And last 4-5 years, we are really competing in the market because we are absolutely working in a commercial atmosphere. All our competitors are from private sector. So we are doing very well. In fact, we are a listed company in both the National Stock Exchange and Bombay Stock Exchange as well. And also, if you kindly go through our website, you'll know the last 4 years, the phenomenal growth has taken place. This is brief about my company. Now, coming back to the digitization, I would like to share with you that the government companies, although Madam said that many of the PSUs adopted the technology quite early, maybe because now government companies, there are few giants like say Maharatna, Navaratna companies. They are certainly very big giants, and they have, some of them adapted technology like BPCL, Indian Oil, ONGC. They have adapted NTPC. But for the other smaller companies, medium size or smaller companies, they are really reluctant to adapt to the technology. Because even I found that when we take it as basic as adapting to the ERP, which is about 15-20 years old concept today, there is hardly any company who don't have ERP. But even to take this idea before the board, all sorts of resistances we had to face. But fortunately, the digitization, the drive that Honorable Prime Minister last few years has really woken us up. Of course, today that data is the new oil that we are discussing the theme. Data, the potential of data in creating the business value, that was really not fully appreciated by many of us, particularly the medium and small size public sector undertakings. But that situation is changing now. Now we are not only, we have already embarked on setting up our ERP system, because it is any technology adoption comes with, along with the uncertainty, some high cost also. The question comes is that can we afford this cost? The moment you look at it as a cost, you get really back out, because the government focuses that you reduce cost 10%, 5% like that. But I always articulated to my fellow colleagues in the board, as well as everyone, wherever it is possible, say, let us not look at it as a cost, because if you are investing in a technology, you are investing in the future. It is like any acquisition of any other assets. Fortunately, that thought process has now really come. Now I can see the enthusiasm. Not only that Department of Public Enterprises are forcing us that we should have an ERP system, but also among the people, that acceptance is there. So nowadays the ERP project that is taking place, it is coming very fast, as Madam has correctly said. But I will say that it is better late than never. Now, your question is, what are the technology that we should develop, that we should deploy? I would say the very basic, because if you have to take advantage of data, very basic is that you set up the ERP, you roll out the ERP system, cover as much as functions as possible. In fact, I said that as a next step is that you, the main production, that productive unit or the service delivery unit, that process also you capture through automation. When I talk automation, not only automation for the sake of it, it has to be 100% automation. Human intervention has to be as minimum as possible, because we have seen the advantages from some of the social interventions that from government. We have seen that GST system itself, for example, last few initial 2-3 years there was struggle. When you deploy a system countrywide of so much of a large country like more than 135 crore people, obviously there will be some glitches. So, but we have now seen the advantages, the revenue generation that is taking place. Every month now that it has stabilized, everybody is happy. So that is the power of the technology. Initially there would be glitches, initially there would be hiccups. In fact, we should not get intimidated by the hiccups that is taking place. We should show our resolve to the technology, because today, of course, there is no reason, there is no need for a kind of debate on whether technology should adapt or not. It is already kind of old concept. Technology, we have no option but to adapt it. In our personal life, we have already adapted technology in every aspect. Even our old parents, grandparents, they have adapted by, as you correctly said. So in terms of in this company, what are the kind of success story, as you said? I would like to pick up one success story from this finance department you are saying. Of course, I don't see myself as a finance person. I see myself as a business person rather than a finance person. So, but still, I will say that when Honorable Prime Minister declared that there would be demonetization, so at that time, Ministry started following up that we should make all payments only through digital mode. And I'm very happy to. I'm very. Am I audible?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. We can hear you.
And the picture has gone, so that's why I'm hesitant. So what we did before that, even before that, we adapted the 100% digital payment. We are never issuing any check, not even a demand draft. So all our vendors, they are habituated to get the payment made into their account as soon as the as soon as the material,
But we can hear you, sir.
I'm sorry, this thing little bit.
Yeah, but we can hear you.
Okay. So I was discussing is that
we can see you and hear you, so don't stop. Go ahead.
Okay, madam. Sorry for the intervention during this period. What we did is that we started making payment to our vendors to their accounts directly, and with the extra focus from the country that you should only adopt digital, and every month, every week you report how much digital transaction was taking place. So we started reporting. But what are the success stories that my vendors are so happy with our kind of system that they are really not interested to go some other mode. Like say we have adapted now GeM portal. Government focus is that everyone has to onboard into the GeM portal. But my MSME people, they are quite reluctant. We are counseling them. We are trying to tell them it is a government policy. You have to adapt. There is no way. They say that we are quite happy. They wait for some time. Then when it gets a little delayed, they say that you please make payment directly because we are happy with that. And GeM portal, there's probably some commission they are asking for. So they are not ready to accede to that commission. So what is the resultant benefit of it is that when we hold our vendors meet, they come with so much of the praise for the company that we feel vindicated that through digital payment, we have reduced all the in-between processes, and the vendors are very happy and they are quoting only the best quote they are giving, because ours is a absolutely transparent process of, because procurement we have adapted even 2-3 years back. So it is a 100% transparent process. We say that we are here to encourage you. So please adapt to the technology, come through the technology, and you see the benefit. So I see that they have seen the benefit, and company has benefited by in terms of reducing its cost. So maybe this is one of the success story. In fact, if you depending upon the time, I can continue. But I feel I'm completely sold up to the technology. In my previous assignment, I was the main person in implementing ERP in one of the PSU. There we have faced how we have difficulty we have faced, that we have seen. But these are the part of the process. It is not intimidating us. It is only give us encouragement that you are on the right path. If you are to do something good for the company, you have to withstand this kind of hurdles. So with that, the PSUs are right now completely ready to reap the benefits of database. Because I feel that after you deploy the ERP system, then you integrate your system with the production process, integrate your system with that of the vendors, integrate your system with that of the your customers, so that you develop a very robust database. Then the data is available. How you exploit it by using analytics, by using artificial intelligence techniques, by just data mining and predicting when the next repair maintenance issue is going to come, which are the particular plant unit is going to fail because our plant is 30 years old. So it consists of many of the integrated smaller components. Which component is going to fail? How much it has already, what suits its life? Those things are possible only if you have a robust data management system and you have the resolve to utilize the benefit of that. I feel as of now, we are progressing towards that. So we'll see to it that PSUs, they get all the benefit of the technology, that digital India, that's the vision of Honorable Prime Minister. We are fully to it and we'll make it, and we can make it to compete with any other private sector, because unless we are in a position to set our system, our edge will not come from with the private sector, edge will be the private sector. With this, I end. So I certainly like to take more questions when the audience would like. Thank you very much for the opportunity.
No, thank you, Mr. Gorai. That was really detailed viewpoint, and I understand your questions about adopting to the technology, and then success is basically drives. Now, in the interest of time, we'll move to the next speaker, and Mr. And this is very critical, Mr. Shyamal. I'm coming to you. Basically, we spoke about digitization, we spoke about technology, we spoke about the data. In the current age, the deployment of business application that can act as a game changer, and in fact, it's acting when it comes to the business transformation or the future readiness. What kind of application should PSUs and the government offices consider in order to bring about such a transformation? We have heard, but from an application perspective, what is your thought from adoption for the government and government entities? Mr. Shyamal.
Thank you, Dr. Singh. Just a quick introduction to Infosys to begin with. We are a next generation consulting and digital services company with over 3 decades of experience in the systems and workings of large enterprises, including public sector. We are eminently placed to help our clients navigate their digital transformation journey. So the trends that we are seeing in the market from a technology perspective is that it's all about customer centricity that Mr. Upadhyay touched upon, and it's all about customer experience that all our other panelists touch upon in some form, shape, or manner. So what we are seeing is that in order to enhance the customer experience, it's really important that organizations, instead of adopting off-the-shelf packages, which we refer to as COTS, commercial off-the-shelf packages, that they invest in technology platforms which have been already uplifted or accelerated to help them hit the ground running and actually enable digitization faster and enhance the customer experience faster and get quick return on investment. So I'd like to take a couple of examples. So if we look at, for instance, the banking sector and the public sector in banking, at Infosys, we have a solution called Modern CX for Banking. And as the name states, some of the key outcomes addressed by this solution help to amplify the digital experience and automate functionalities tailored to CX for sales, mobility for service, field force, artificial intelligence for automation in selling and service. And it provides key benefits around a pre-configured CX solution integrated with the core banking platform that a bank might use, with tailored business processes for around banking specific selling, cross-selling, upselling, and so on and so forth. If we were to extend this example to, let's say, utilities, for instance, central government utilities in the public sector, again, as opposed to just implementing a standard commercial off-the-shelf solution, the request would be for organizations to consider an IP solution. In this instance, the Infosys Modern CX for Utilities solution. For instance, this solution helps in streamlining business processes around the utility sector, Customer 360 to gather and maintain customer information in one place, real-time updates of application progress, proactive alerts on energy fluctuation and business process automation, for customer validation and appointment creation, and resource picking based on skill set. It also provides insights-based selling, service, marketing, and analytics. So the point I'm trying to make is that in order to accelerate the customer experience and to accelerate the digital transformation journey, it's really important to invest in IP solutions which have already been built to address the specific nuances of the industry in question to enhance the customer experience. Dr. Singh.
Thank you, sir. Thank you. Such a really crisp and the tight message you had, and that really your advisory, I'm sure that most of PSU will take it forward in order to make future ready corporation. Now, couple of point came out in our two part of discussion. One, Mr. Upadhyay first raised about customer centricity and customer experience, and I think Mr. Shamali also spoke about customer power. The other piece came across digitization, and there's no, and Dr. Sharma mentioned detail, and followed by Mr. Gorai, and Mr. Gorai also talked about data as a new oil, and I think that's a phrase being used, and in fact in DNB we are basically using more often because we are in the data and analytics business. So now with that, I think I'm moving on to the third and last part of this panel discussion. Basically what we spoke, data, analytics, digitization, customer experience and centricity, unlocking the power of data and insight to drive some value addition for a customer and making more of efficient and productive company going forward and contributing to the economy. With that, I will come to you, Mr. Sastry, because I think you are in the core part of this one. And Dr. Sharma spoke about it, but I think I'll take your viewpoint. How is data being used to bring about better outcomes, both from an operational and societal value creation standpoint? Basically, data has emerged as a new gold. That's we talked about new gold, new oil, whatever you talk about. But what is your viewpoint about that?
Well, over a period of time, data has really emerged as an important asset for development of the country, as well as the driver for the digital economy and the digital growth. Now, government's shift towards digitalization through initiatives like Digital India program has resulted in a dramatic increase in the data. Added to that is the variety of the devices which are now connected to internet and which are transmitting the data. For example, the edge devices in the smart city environment. So this has really led to a proliferation of the data. So under the Digital India program, as we see, there are a whole variety of government initiatives which are making extensive use of the data and using best-in-class analytical tools to derive value out of this data. Some of the examples include like Swachh Bharat Mission, Housing for All, Manrega, One Nation, One Ration Card, Pradhan Mantri Ujjwala Yojana, fertilizer distribution, e-way bill, e-invoice. These are some of the very, very critical and flagship programs where a whole lot of data is being collected by the systems. So now this data is being used right from formulation of the schemes to implementation and monitoring of the schemes. So it's an extensive use of the data which these schemes are making for these purposes. During the COVID pandemic also, we have seen the data was extensively used for contact tracing, prediction of hotspots, trend analysis, and take appropriate measures to curb the spread of the virus. Data was also used for facility management, now even tracking of oxygen by using the data which is coming from the plants directly through the IoT devices. This is what has happened during the pandemic. And we have also, apart from these applications which are developed, NIC has developed certain platforms which are using the analytics to show the KPIs and help in monitoring of the very, very important schemes. One of the dashboards which is being developed by NIC for PMO is the Prayas dashboard, which shows KPIs of many flagship schemes and helps in analytics. In addition to that, NIC also has developed a very robust platform called Tejas, which is an analytical platform which connects to multiple data sources, collates and then processes the data to show the data in a wide variety of charts, etc. With these kind of initiatives, the data is definitely getting analyzed more and more and helping in making a decision for the policymakers. In fact, one of the initial statements made by Mr. Alok was for digitally engaging the citizens. So MyGov is a very prime example of digitally engaging the citizens, which citizens participate in formulation of government schemes and programs and provide their views, which helps in making the decision makers take decisions. And as far as the collaboration is concerned, e-office is a shining example of collaboration, because this helps in seamless exchange of files across the departments. So they collaborate in a very seamless manner, and during the COVID period also, this movement of files and processing of files didn't stop, and the government's work continued even during the pandemic period. So this is how the data is helping in decision making.
Thank you, Mr. Shastri. Dr. Sharma, you touched base about data, and coming to you, the true power of the data. As I said, we spoke, and this coming out lies in the insight that can be derived from it. What are some of the technology that can help bring data to life in the form of some meaningful insights that can lead to the better decision making? What is your viewpoint, Dr. Sharma?
Absolutely. One thing is very important, that we have to break the silos in the social sector departments wherever, and most important is that Aadhaar is not household based. Aadhaar is individual number, and eligibility for any social benefits and better targeting, if we are talking about, we need a household based data. And that kind of a data is already available in government sector in terms of the census survey we do, in terms of the NREGA we are doing, in terms of SECC, which was done in the government. So if these three are collaborated, you will have a wonderful database, which will help in better targeting of the various welfare schemes that government is aiming at. Besides welfare scheme, it will also help in targeting for the better livelihoods. So when you look at these data, like when you are looking at it, you will have a complete horizontal linkage of what all is happening in that particular household. They have a permanent house, or they have a clean drinking water, or some children are studying, not studying, getting scholarship, death in the family, linking with the insurance sector data when death happens, so that automatically it goes. So breaking silos is the first thing which is very important, which is going in a very big way. Then stepping out, many a times people feel that e-commerce is only in the private sector. A lot of e-commerce is there in the government sector, where your GEM portal is one of the examples which is visible to public, very strong. So data is supposed to be for analysis. Otherwise, why are we getting the data? So analysis has to be agnostic. So when we are talking of a data privacy, you can go for the trends. You have to camouflage the data. So that kind of a discipline is to be maintained. So one, in a social sector, you go in a very big way, targeting for your better livelihood opportunities which are sustainable. We have to, if India wants to overcome in the coming year from subsistence to sustainable to surplus earnings, then there is no other way than specific targeting, whether it is skilling, whether it is making them available and graduating them. So that is a complete opportunity that is available, and where the data can be put in. Literally, it is going digital in a very big way. But unfortunately, again, 15 is to be seen as to why, again, it has been translated into cash and has entered the market. The fourth is, of course, the security, what we are talking about. And you did make a mention, it might have happened in power in Maharashtra, or might be a technical failure that is not yet answered, but that it says the possibility of doing it. The US, it has, and therefore, when you are looking after the data, it is very important as part of it also when you're looking at the security. Luckily, we are very strong in detection of these attacks, but very slow in reaction for correcting it. So that is another analytics which has to come up so that we protect ourselves with the attack. So looking at the entire panorama, when technology is increasing in the entire life cycle of manufacturing, entire life cycle of an individual's behavior as a customer, definitely this is something which will enable for, and like I said before, a very good inclusive growth model where the resources are optimally utilized for the benefits.
So thank you, Dr. Sharma. That was wonderful. And to be very honest, I'm conscious about the timing. And I think there is some question coming in, from audience. And I think I must read because I think we must also give some time to the audience. One question as of now it's open, but I think if I could request Dr. Sharma, you, Dr. Sharma, Mr. Sastry, if you can share your perspective on this one. With digitization vis-a-vis.
Okay. I will say that the NPCI platform, now which is a uniform single platform, is providing and monitoring this entire transferring of the money. It may take a little time, but it gets tracked. It is not that PG not being there, everybody to again repunch, then the possibilities of mistransaction part of it, but some mistake which the beneficiary itself has done in giving a command. So tracking technology-wise today existing, it is possible, but the time span can be reduced and multiple time of entering into your database is subject to, again, cybersecurity and should be avoided as we are moving ahead. So it is possible. And this tracking, of course, the onus is of the bank to ensure and rectify it.
Thank you, Dr. Sharma, for that wonderful insight. But I think I'm sure that the person who asked the question got the answer. There's one more question coming in this time for Sri Upadhyay ji. The person is asking the energy sectors in our nation progress by contributing to ease of living and ease of doing business. How would you summarize India's current status in terms of being self-sufficient?
This peak which we have touched this year, which is ever in history, was 200 gigawatt plus. It is one amount of electricity generated in any part of the country. To problem in our sector is the distribution sector. Distribution sector, because of the subsidy not being given in time, government departments not use of distribution non-viable. They are incurring losses of almost 30,000 crores per year. And it has come down now, otherwise earlier it used to be 70,000 crores per year. We have a solution. We have rolled out a scheme in next 2 to 3 years. We plan to replace all meters from consumer to generator with prepaid meters. So we will have prepaid smart meters. It will be almost like telecom sector.
Understand. Thank you, Mr. Upadhyay. And I think there's one question, Mr. Shamal. I know your comment was very crisp. I think the person is asking the questions. In fact, one. You want to take up all the questions together or one by one? There's a 2 question for you, Mr. Chha.
So let me take the first one, Dr. Singh. So from a CXO priority perspective, the focus should be on how to enhance the customer experience. As the title says, CXO. So, CX, how to enhance CX. It's all about the customer. And especially with this generation, it's all about instant gratification. So what do we do to enhance the customer experience? What do we do to enable instant gratification? It's all about that. So again, I'd like to repeat the message I said, as opposed to investing in standard COTS or commercial off-the-shelf solutions, to invest rather in CX oriented solutions. And I gave 2 examples for the banking sector, modern CX for banking. And for instance, if we look at central government utilities, we can take the example of modern CX for utilities. because these solutions are structured from the ground up to enhance the customer experience. They are designed around enhancing the customer experience. They're all about enhancing the customer experience. So that would be my recommendation.
So thank you, Mr. Shamal. There's another question for you, so I thought I'll ask together. What are the advantages of leveraging an enterprise ecosystem that integrates ERP, CRM, and other critical applications? What kind of ROI can be expected from such a move?
I think that's an absolutely brilliant question, and that's where, Mr. Alok Ratan Sharma earlier referred to, the Microsoft Business Application Suite. So if we look at, Microsoft Business Applications, for instance, and more specifically, it's got some components. So you have the Microsoft Dynamics 365 platform, which is across ERP, it's across CRM, right? So you take care of enterprises, resources planning, management. And then you have the whole concept of the Microsoft Power Platform to usher in low-code, no-code technologies. So gone are the days when, a core application like ERP or CRM, if it organization implementing it, as well as in the best interest of customers, keeping CX in mind.
So there are, thank you, Mr. Shamal. I think there are a couple of quick comment coming in. I think Mr. Shah, there is one question. So in the interest of time, I would ask the last question. I think before we summarize, Mr. Shah has asked that how has your company leveraged digital transformation and modernization to its advantage? Were there any challenge? If yes, how are these? How you overcome? I think you touched base, but I think there's a specific question asked by our audience.
Okay, let me answer this. I'll go one step forward like this. What benefit we have received, how we have moved ahead during this COVID time. See, if you look back, PFC had been at the forefront of adopting latest technology, as always, for improving our productivity. With a lean manpower, we are a company of less than 500 officials, and we are managing our pan-India operation with this. Yes, how we have used technology, the result which we have received, out of that, the benefit which you have got, let me put 4 or 5 pointers to understand it better. See, we have online screening system for loan proposals which we receive for renewable energy, particularly solar and wind, and we do online screening, which has made our system much faster. We have developed, and it is in the final stage, an online project monitoring system. The power projects which we are funding across states in the country, we are doing monitoring. This is web-based monitoring that we are successfully doing it, and we are doing it better now. Yes, we have an e-office system, e-office as was rightly mentioned, and we are benefited out of it. We can work remotely. During this COVID time, it has helped us a lot. During this pandemic period, our operation was never disrupted even for a day, and we are proud of this. In fact, we have posted our highest ever annual profit and loan disbursement in 2020-21, which is this big pandemic period. I'll just mention another point. March 2020, the last week, we could disburse 11,000 crore in the last week. All of us were sitting remotely. Many of us are sitting at their home. None of us are in the office. We could disburse 11,000 crore. Just to give you perspective of this 11,000 crore, it is about 12.5% of the annual disbursement. This we could successfully make by using technology. We are definitely in the forefront. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Shah, for your answer. I think it was really wonderful conversation, everyone, and thank you for being part of this panel discussion. I think there's no doubt about the fact that PSUs and the government offices have contributed immensely to the India's economic growth for last 75 years and continue to do that. But there's many element of consideration, commercial, non-commercial, heavy lifting, and promoting the socio-economic development of the countries. I think PSUs running and running fast. There are some of the lessons we have learned and we have to basically implement in order to make those journeys smooth. And I think it's happening. Last few years, if I have to look at the digital transformation, I think most of you have mentioned, and I think there's a broader alignment that digital transformation is basically, it's a purposeful and it's taken with deliberate outcome, with deliberate action, and there is a intention behind it. And we can see the output. And I was just mentioning that last few days I'm traveling and I'm not using any hard currencies. Basically everything is like digitized. It's so smooth, customer centric, and that's basically is happening. Data and analytics is basically new consideration, and data is new gold, data is new oil, everything being discussed. And I think there is a broad consensus. If you want to grow, you want to continue in this journey and keep driving the recovery process of the India and then next 75 years. Digital transformation and the data analytics is the tool. I think it's very critical, very important. With that, I will close my panel discussion. I hope that we had wonderful insight and people will really enjoy that one. Thank you. And now I will hand over to Fraser for you. Thank you, Mr.
Now, that was a wonderful and insightful discussion, wasn't it? I certainly had some great takeaways, and I'm sure the audience will have enjoyed that discussion as much as I did. First, let me thank Dr. Singh for so beautifully weaving together and summarizing that entire panel discussion, and also helping in answering the relevant questions raised by our attendees. Truly valuable takeaways from that session. With this, we bring today's virtual event to a close. Today's session wouldn't have been a success without the active participation of all our esteemed panelists and delegates. I would like to thank each one of you for taking your time out and being a part of this virtual event today. A special thanks to our co-partners, Microsoft and Infosys, without whose support this initiative wouldn't have been possible. Thank you very much once again, ladies and gentlemen. It was great to be in your company this afternoon. Take care, everyone. Stay safe.